Retail theft was on the rise for a while in California. And then came Prop 36, which passed recently by a significant margin. Now we're wondering, is this going to change the retail theft? And is retail theft going away in California? Our guest today is Jeff Reisig, who's an architect of Prop 36. He's also the district attorney for Yolo County. He's here to tell us what's happening with retail theft now, what he's hearing from his colleagues, law enforcement, and retailers.
We're seeing a change. Law enforcement across California has been very excited about having these new tools to go after the repeat thieves. They feel emboldened again, empowered, and then we're also hearing from the retailers themselves. They're seeing a decrease in the day-to-day theft that used to be out of control prior to Prop 36.
I'm Siamak Korami. Welcome to California Insider. Jeff, it's great to have you back on. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
You know, you have been somebody that actually have campaigned aggressively for Prop 36. You're a district attorney, and you've helped writing this, right? This proposition.
It's true. I was one of the principal architects.
Now Prop 36 has passed, and Californians have been somewhat frustrated with thefts, you know, especially in areas like San Francisco, LA. Are things changing because this proposition passed?
They are changing, and the good news is Prop 36 has only been in effect now since December 18th. That's when it kicked into law, and we're seeing a change, and we're hearing about a change. First, you know, law enforcement across California has been very excited about having these new tools to go after the repeat thieves, and we're hearing directly from the law enforcement officers. They feel emboldened again, empowered. They're responding to calls that maybe they wouldn't used to respond to because now there's the real potential for accountability. So that's one thing. And then we're also hearing from the retailers themselves, the big box stores, the mom and pop shop. They're seeing a difference. They're seeing a decrease in the day-to-day theft that used to be out of control prior to Prop 36. Because if you remember, prior to Prop 36, somebody could come in and steal every day, 10 times a day, every day of the week, and as long as it was under $950, it was a ticket. So you literally had people that were doing this all the time. That has dried up in a lot of places, is what we're hearing from the retailers. Now we're waiting to see the official data to prove that to be true, but anecdotally we're hearing these stories. And then the last part of it is we're actually hearing from some of the criminals themselves. There's been viral videos, including some out of Southern California, where people are getting caught and they're actually being put in handcuffs and in the back of the car. And they're realizing then that stealing is now a felony if you have 2 or more prior convictions. And those viral messages are spreading, and the deterrent effect is actually sinking in.
And you mentioned you're hearing anecdotally from people. Can you tell us the stories?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing it as one of the principal architects of Prop 36 and also been involved in the campaign from day one. I'm checking in from tip to tip in California, from San Diego to Northern California, and retailers are definitely seeing a change. It's not perfect, you know, there's still work to be done, but what they're saying is that the day-to-day theft that they used to experience prior to Prop 36 has decreased. The repeat thieves that used to, frankly, terrorize some retailers have disappeared. Now, part of the reason for that is because Prop 36 has actually resulted in over 3,000 felony charges since it went into effect. And those people, many of those people are now in jail or prison, where they need to be, because these were repeat thieves who previously were just getting a ticket and walking away laughing after they committed the theft. Not anymore. Those people are being arrested, prosecuted for felonies, and many are going to jail. An interesting point on that is that when we look at the data for those 3,000 felonies since Prop 36 went into effect, we saw that 80% of the people who were being charged actually already had prior convictions for felonies. 25% had prior convictions for violent felonies. So these are serious criminals, the people that were committing these crimes. We think that what we're seeing right now in the early stages is a reduction in the theft because of the deterrent effect, and also many of these repeat thieves are being held accountable finally and going to prison or jail.
Do the retailers, do they know exactly how much do they lose by theft every month?
It depends from retailer to retailer. The bigger box stores, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Home Depots are much better
They have better systems.
Yeah, better systems and better accounting for those types of losses. They certainly will be able to tell us at the end of the year how the data looks after Prop 36 versus before. So we're very interested in working with them to follow those trends. It's a little bit tougher for some of the mom and pop shops, is what we've experienced. But we will collect all that data and we will be putting it out publicly through the California District Attorneys Association, which I'm a member of, and also the media. We'll make sure the media gets it.
Now, based on the anecdotal examples you're hearing, is people saying less people are coming to steal from us? Is that they see less incidents?
For sure. Yeah, they're seeing some of the faces that used to frequently pop up for some of these stores. We call them repeat offenders, recidivists, people that were just coming in every day. What we're hearing anecdotally is those numbers have dropped off dramatically. That's not happening anymore. And it happens, but not at the level that we were seeing before, where every day you would turn on the news and see another story of somebody going in and loading up a bag full of goods and walking out the door, right? Those incidents are down dramatically, and we're hearing that across the state.
And what about the police?
Before Prop 36, if you stole any amount under $950, it was a misdemeanor. And police weren't even allowed to arrest somebody for that crime unless they personally witnessed the theft, like the officer had to be there to view it, or that somebody in the store made a citizen's arrest of that individual. And that simply didn't happen. It was very rare that an officer was around to view it, and it was also rare for somebody to make a citizen's arrest. And even if they did make a citizen's arrest, the most the officer could do is give them a ticket, which is said, come to court at a future date, and the person would walk. So that was the fundamental problem with the law before. It was toothless, it was weak, there was no real accountability, and the officers were frustrated because even if they did respond to a 911 call for a theft, very little could be done and almost nothing ever happened to hold these people accountable. And that was frustrating for clearly the business owner, but also frustrating for the officers. That's changed because now, as a result of Prop 36, if the person has prior convictions, they can be arrested for a felony, regardless of the fact that the officer didn't view the theft in person, and it doesn't need a citizen's arrest.
So they can go and investigate it? Is that how it works?
Exactly.
Like for each theft case, they can go and follow up, and because before they couldn't investigate, or if the arrest hadn't been done, they couldn't.
Yeah, when it was just a misdemeanor, again, the officers either had to view it personally, they had to view the theft, or somebody would have to make what's called the citizen's arrest, which is basically say, I saw the theft and I'd like you to arrest this person for this crime. It was broken law, broken system. Now, because of Prop 36, the officers can investigate call it a cold theft, and then make a felony arrest if the person has priors. And that's a powerful tool. And in many of these cases, what we're seeing is the officers, they will respond to the calls now because the stakes have been raised for the penalties. These are felony responses now in many cases because of the people have prior convictions. If they're known to the officers, if they're known to the business owner, and that information is transmitted during the 911 call, you're going to get a felony response, and that person's going to go to jail. They're actually going to get arrested, put in the back of the car, and taken to jail, booked, and hopefully held until they see a judge.
Some of you may be wondering, why are we talking about Shenyun on California Insider? It's a dance about China, but ancient China. I'm a big fan of Shenyun. I've been to it 14 times. Every year I go. The first time I went to Shenyun, it was so amazing. It was so uplifting. The colors, the energy, they put you into scenes of thousands of years ago, and you feel like how the ancient people lived, and you get to appreciate the history of humanity. There's a lot more to this show. It's gonna be here in Southern California, and I wanna make sure you guys go see it. You don't wanna miss this show. You have to see it at least once. And make sure to tell us what you think afterwards.
It was spectacular, so beautiful.
I thought I was going to heaven.
Oh, it was electric.
I'm getting chills talking about it.
It gets a 10 from me, that's for sure.
It was that good.
Absolutely marvelous.
Hands down the best show I've ever seen.
Now, but if a person doesn't have a felony and they just steal petty theft? We had one of our guests on the show a few weeks ago that has a coffee shop in San Francisco. He has a really good coffee shop. The community loves his place, his coffee shop, because his parents have been involved for many years, and they have one specific person that's coming a few times a week and is taking something very small, stealing a water bottle or chips, and he's very afraid that his customers might get into an argument with this thief. And he's a homeless individual. He might have mental illnesses, and he's afraid that there might be a conflict that could cause a lot of problems, bigger than the theft. But what about a case like that? How does that work?
So Proposition 36 has tools for that as well. And the way it works is, for somebody like that who's probably mentally ill, it doesn't discount the theft. It's still a theft that should be reported and can be charged if he has multiple priors of theft. On the third offense, he can be charged with a felony. The significance of that is everything we've talked about, which is the officers can actually make the arrest, put him in handcuffs, take him to jail. But that doesn't mean necessarily that that person will go to prison or jail for a lengthy period of time. If a more appropriate resolution would be mental health court. Some type of court-compelled treatment. These are things that are available all over California, and it was written into the law, actually. Prop 36 specifically says the law allows district attorneys and courts to divert people who are better suited through some type of drug treatment or mental health treatment. So in the example that you're giving me, that may be a perfect example where the person should be arrested and he should be charged with a felony if he has the prior convictions. But then once they get into the court system, they can work on getting him into the appropriate path for treatment and recovery. The goal isn't simply to just lock up people who are seriously mentally ill in jail or prison. That's not going to help anybody. But we have leverage now. Before we had no leverage.
That's exactly what he told us. He said the only thing that he could do is he would just say he would get restraining orders against him, because he would say he's in danger personally. He couldn't do it for the business because it was so expensive. The theft didn't really matter to the legal law enforcement infrastructure. They couldn't do anything about it because probably petty or.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what we saw all over California, with especially small business owners who were being hit routinely by, many of these people who were mentally ill or homeless would come in, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. This is the story I heard repeatedly during the Prop 36 campaign. Small businesses told us they were dying by 1,000 cuts, little thefts every day from people. Sometimes it's the repeat thieves who are just criminals, and many times it's people who are coming in like a homeless individual who may be mentally ill or addicted. And so Prop 36 has tools for all of that. That's the good news. We have to start out by recognizing that the old way was broken. It wasn't working. California suffered because of it for a decade. It was because there was no accountability. We have accountability again with Prop 36, but we also have tools to get people into the appropriate treatment if they need it.
There are some people from San Francisco, some of our friends in San Francisco that are public defenders, that are afraid and that this could go too far. And there's a judge in San Francisco that believes that this Prop 36 is going too far, and it might arrest a lot of people.
It's really not a legitimate fear, because Prop 36 was written to give local control to the district attorneys and the judges. The judges, at the end of the day, hold all the cards. They are the ones that issue the sentences, right? It's not the DAs. The DAs simply bring the charges, and then if a conviction is sustained by a jury or otherwise, it's the judge. If a judge believes in his or her discretion that somebody should not suffer a felony conviction, Prop 36 allows the judge to drop it down to a misdemeanor on his or her own motion. And we can't stop that. If a judge believes that somebody should do no jail time for the crime, they can do that. If the judge believes a person would be better suited through some type of diversion program, mental health diversion, the judge can do that. That's what's great about Prop 36, is it brought back local control so that those decisions, like that this judge may have an issue with it, well, He or she can decide how she wants to handle those cases. But it may be a different approach, Modoc County, California, right? Very northern part of the state, where they have a different view on everything. And I think that's appropriate. California's a huge state. We have 58 counties, nearly 40 million people. We have more people here than Canada, more people than Australia. The fact that there is a different approach to criminal prosecution and sentencing from county to county, I believe is very appropriate. And frankly, even our governor over the years has talked about the importance of local control, returning control to the locals so they can make decisions that are more aligned with their values on many of these issues. That's exactly what Prop 36 did.
One of the things that happened for a lot of Californians in this process of, we went through the process of voting for Prop 36 because people saw the theft skyrocketing, but somehow the statistics didn't show much. And the media didn't really bring this up until things got locked up and people could see with their own eyes what they couldn't see in the newspapers and the crime statistics. How reliable are the crime statistics?
It's a great point, and we clearly saw that there was an underreporting of theft in the years after Prop 47. Prop 47 was the root of the problem. I know you've talked about it on the show. We've talked about it. That happened in 2014, and that was what allowed people to steal up to $950 every day, 10 times a day, and only get a ticket, right? But what happened is, as the years went by, you can see in the data there was the reporting of crimes started to drop. And when we talked to businesses and retailers about what were they actually doing when a theft crime occurred, they would admit they didn't even bother to call it in anymore. Because what's the point? Nothing's going to happen. And so it's absolutely fair to say that the data, the publicly available data that was out there showed that theft in many places had not gone up. Now there are exceptions to that. So in the lead up to Prop 36, where things really started to get out of hand, you did start to see places like Los Angeles study very specifically petty theft, and they found a 100% increase in the petty theft, leading up to Prop 36. I can't explain why there was suddenly an increase in the reporting, other than perhaps the fact that businesses knew that there was something on the ballot that might bring a remedy, encourage them to promote.
So they started reporting it.
We all agree on, and I think you referenced this, is that Californians saw it with their own eyes. I mean, people all over the state were seeing the thefts on the news, on social media. If you go into a store in any metropolitan area, you would see product locked up behind glass. It became inconvenient to buy all kinds of products because they were locked up. That's not normal. That's not how California was 10 years ago. And people, I think, ultimately voted yes on Prop 36, in large part because they saw it with their own eyes and they've just had enough. So the data is always a problem in the criminal justice system because it's imperfect. It's imperfect in the reporting, it's imperfect in the collection, it's imperfect in the way that it's reported out by the news media and researchers. That's my experience, almost 30 years in criminal justice.
If you were to give us, and this might be a very hard question, if you were to give us some estimates, how much can we trust that data?
It's a great question. I think that you have to always try and verify the data, the government data, with some other sources. And I know that sounds a little bit vague, but I don't trust the government data. And I'm a member of the government as a prosecutor. And whenever I see the data, I always question everything we just talked about. Is what effect does underreporting have on it? What effect does human error have sometimes on the entry of data? These are real things, not just in California, all over the country. Again, Prop 36 is a great example because there was a huge disconnect between what the official data showed for many years and what people saw with their own eyes. And maybe at the end of the day, the fact that 70% of the people voted for Prop 36 shows you that people chose not to trust the government data, which many on the opposition were waving around studies saying crime was down, theft is down. That wasn't the experience we had, and it wasn't true.
What other crimes in California that people need to pay attention to? Is there anything else that that you might think we should pay attention to that we may not be hearing about?
Well, I think we continue to be really plagued by fentanyl and the scourge of fentanyl all over California. Now, since the change in the administration and there's been less fentanyl coming into California, that's a fact. But it's still, what's out there is driving a lot of overdoses and a lot of violence in communities. So that's something I would put at the top of the chart for things that I remain concerned about. And the second thing is human trafficking. I think that continues to be a real problem in California because we have huge immigrant populations that are often victimized, they're taken advantage of. We also have the highest poverty rate in the nation, which is involved, in my opinion, in some of the human trafficking. We just see this issue still going strong in a negative way, all the way up the Interstate 5 and across California, tip to tip.
You mentioned violence with fentanyl. Can you explain that?
The real danger with fentanyl, first of all, is that it's so deadly. I mean, I think this is common knowledge at this point, but you know, the statement, one pill can kill. With fentanyl, it's literally one speck can kill. It's so powerful. They're using it now. The drug dealers, mostly out of Mexico, are using fentanyl in every single drug that they are producing. So somebody thinks they're buying cocaine, it has fentanyl in it, guaranteed. They're buying methamphetamine, it has fentanyl in it, guaranteed. Heroin, everything has fentanyl in it. That's incredibly dangerous, and it's resulting in a lot of people dying. But related to that are the dealers that are selling it. And what we've seen in Los Angeles and San Francisco and a lot of the big metropolitan areas is you have people who are drug dealers selling primarily fentanyl. That's the #1 drug out in the streets right now. Most are here illegally. Most are armed with firearms. And it's a very dangerous profession, obviously. We're seeing that continues to be a driver of both the addiction issue, because there's still dealers all over major cities slinging fentanyl, but it also is connected to much of the violence we see with the increased shootings and felonious assaults, which, again, the data, if you believe the data, felonious assaults went up dramatically in the last few years. We believe that it's tied to the open drug use, the fentanyl, the drug scene.
Are they different, these drug dealers that are doing fentanyl, with the previous drug dealers that we've had in this state? Do you see a difference?
There is a difference. I mean, what we're seeing is the fentanyl dealers that are here now, or the drug dealers are here now, many of them are actually coming in from places like the Central America. They're literally being recruited, trained, and deployed to California to sell drugs. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you still had drug dealers. We still had a lot of people that were being held accountable, but they tended to be more, frankly, local people. And that was my experience. I was a drug prosecutor, a drug and a gang prosecutor for a decade before I became the DA, the elected DA. That was my experience. It's a different crowd now, and many of them are connected with cartels and powerful criminal enterprises.
This administration has designated cartels as terror organizations. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's perfect. I think it's right. They are terrorist organizations, and I'm glad that the administration has designated them so. I mean, especially, the MS-13 and the gang out of Venezuela coming up. If you just spend a few minutes and study the crimes that these gangs are committing, I don't think any reasonable person would disagree. Murder, rape, human trafficking, drug dealing, the stories across our country about families, women in particular, who've been murdered and raped by these gang members. How is that not terrorism? I think it's a great tool to have, and I think
how does it help them? How does this designation help for the prosecution side of it, for going after them?
It certainly helps on the federal side. Now, I'm not a federal prosecutor, I'm a state prosecutor, but the designation by itself opens up new resources and tools to go after them, and my understanding is it also allows some enhanced deportation proceedings, which we've seen in the news recently. Now, I know some of that may be subject to litigation, but it appears that the administration the Trump administration is committed to getting these terrorists, these drug dealers, these rapists, these murderers who are here illegally, and they're connected to those gangs, getting them out of the country as fast as possible under a number of different provisions. So I fully support it. I think that it's certainly driven the problem in California for years, and I have no hesitation about it at all. This is the story where recently the Trump administration, and it was actually Homeland Security, they deported a number of Venezuelan gang members and MS-13 gang members to El Salvador.
So they use this designation of terrorism
Right.
to do that.
The Alien Enemies Act, to deport them summarily without court hearings. And that was on the heels of the administration making the declaration, finding that these were terrorist organizations. I think that's been a very powerful tool. And their argument is that we've been invaded, that the invasion was premeditated. They have evidence that orders were actually given from those countries that directed those individuals to our country for the purpose of committing crimes and selling drugs and causing chaos. I believe it. I don't have any reason to doubt.
And the fentanyl is pretty deadly.
That's right, and I think that's an argument that I also think it makes sense. I mean, fentanyl is wiping out, I think the estimate was 100,000 people died of a fentanyl overdose in America last year. The numbers are probably way higher than that because many of those deaths go unreported. Who's bringing that fentanyl into our country? There are people from south of the border, from Central America, from South America. They're coming into our big metropolitan areas, and they're selling this cheaply, by the way. There was a time in Sacramento, my county, right next to my county, where it was $2, $3 a tab. So you're having massive death because of these drugs being sold by these foreign nationals who are here illegally, selling this poison, and it's connected to violence. What a great way to take out more Americans. I think that's the argument, and I totally subscribe to that.
And the material is sent from China, and they don't allow that type of material from.
Right. China is the largest producer of the precursor chemicals they need to make the fentanyl, and that's one of the reasons for, I think, the administration's tough stance on China and Mexico, because Mexico's been complicit in allowing the fentanyl to come across the border. That's the argument.
You brought up human trafficking, and there's been talk about human trafficking, and there's been some conspiracies about it. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, it's a real thing, and it's much worse than people realize. I say that my experience is I'm near Sacramento. My county is right next to the Capitol, and through our county, my county, I have a couple of major interstates, Interstate 5 and Interstate 80. And human trafficking is something we encounter frequently as gangs are moving, usually young women, up and down Interstate 5 and Interstate 80 for purposes of human trafficking, usually sex slavery. And they'll set them up in hotels, in houses, and people will come in to purchase sex from these women who are being trafficked. Often the victims of these human trafficking they're not here legally. Many are very young. They're being threatened. They're being beaten. And it's a real thing, and it affects all races. And it's something that hasn't really slowed down in California in the last decade, despite law enforcement focus on it. It's continued to be very prolific. So it's something that in my region we're all concerned about, especially when you see some of the victims. A lot of the victims, as I said, are very young, teenagers, young girls. Some are recruited from households where they're essentially seduced by traffickers to come out and meet the trafficker, and then there's a romantic relationship, romantic in the eyes of the teen, but not in the eyes of the criminal. And then the switch comes when they're turned into product to be trafficked. That's happening. It's happened in my community. So it's something that we in law enforcement, both the state and federal level, are totally focused on eliminating.
How organized is it? based on what you see? How big is these networks?
It varies. I mean, there are some, there's some human trafficking that goes on locally. Let's call it pimping and pandering, involving individuals that may have their own particular neighborhood where they're setting up human trafficking. And I'm really talking about the sex trafficking. There's other parts of human trafficking, including labor trafficking. But the sex trafficking tends to be the most prolific and the most, not easy to uncover, but usually it's something that grabs our attention. As far as the organized effort, it's totally tied to organized crime at this point on the larger scale. So you have gangs involved in it, both the gangs we've talked about and then other gangs throughout California. It's a money-making operation. They make a lot of money trafficking these women, traffic the drugs at the same time. So drugs, money, women, guns, all of it is part of the operation.
And how hard is it for these people that are stuck in it to get out? Do you guys get leads from them, or are they afraid of talking to the law enforcement because they might get deported? Or
it's really hard for many of these human trafficking victims to get out. They have been threatened. Many have been beaten. Many have very few options. They feel like they have nowhere to go. They're truly victims who have been brainwashed almost to believe that the person who's selling them, who's pimping them out, is their protector. And so we have seen that firsthand in many, many cases in my county, and I know it's true across the state. It's hard, and so it requires a special type of investigation, a special relationship between the victim and the prosecutors, the investigators working with them. Sometimes they don't cooperate. Often they don't cooperate.
Jeff Reisig, District Attorney of Yolo County, it was great to have you back on California Insider.
Thanks for having me.
Let us know what you see and think is happening with retail theft in California. You can always email us at siamak@californiainsider.com or comment. We read all of your emails and comments. This is Siamak Khorrami with California Insider, and we'll see you next time.